the play set in Warsaw, so it's the Black Country, which is a place that I'm familiar with because I was born and raised there. And I guess the main thing to know about that space is that it's old industry, so it's a very built-up urban area, and that felt really key for how we wanted to stage Amber's home environment. In the design, there's quite a lot of concrete. Concrete being probably the easiest material to kind of locate something built up. The curve itself is concrete, and then the screens that we used for projection is also these big concrete slabs. When you look a little bit closer, you can see they're kind of half built. They've got like supports that are completely, so it's not a finished space necessarily, but it's just that idea of work's always kind of continuing in those sorts of locations. So yeah, I was really interested in how Amber, her story is very much one of trying to finding the confidence to move herself out of the situation. So that's why I was so interested in the curve and how she's in this one location, but through her own motivations and through her own kind of her own self-awareness and learning about who she is a little more, she's able to kind of force her way out of this scenario. And so the design is abstract. The curve obviously represents her sort of movement outwards. We tried a few different curves actually. When we're kind of in part of the design process, we have a model and we're always sort of testing ideas. So within that model, we had a few different versions of how the space could, how the floor even could kind of rise, and what that could look like, what these curves and all these ramps could look like. And so we landed on this sort of shape that is kind of perpendicular to the stage. And it was very much led by the fact that, you know, this is a concrete space. There's no like track lines or anything. We sort of set ourselves the challenge of making this show that just by looking at it wouldn't look like a show about running. But I guess just because it's kind of a long strip that it's raised, sort of speaks to that in a sort of abstracted way. Yeah. Because the book is so lyrical, it's written in verse, it's very poetic. My aim really was to hold on to the lyricism of that, the way Manjeet's been able to write it, and the stage adaptation is pretty close to that feeling. Like I think she's managed to hold on to that feeling too. So my aim was to make sure that the design felt lyrical in the way the book does, that it has a fluidity, which the curve speaks to. The idea about having microphones and speakers on stage and costume changes being visible was all sort of a way to declare what this is without being, without feeling like it's too polished. I don't think it's a polished piece of work or a straight piece of work, like a straight play. Sort of, I find it quite sensory. So sound feels really important, voice feels really important. You know, we're interested in how the breath sounds, which is why the microphones were important, and just really creating a set, even though it's concrete and quite, you know, you assume that material is quite heavy, that there's enough within it. There's a lot of space within that to like characterize all those beautiful ideas and feelings that are present in the book and now the script. Well, Amber sort of tells us everything. She tells us where she is. She tells us sort of what time period we're in her life. The props support her telling of that story. So we've sort of created all these props, or have these props populated around the stage. And so when we're in a specific location, Amber sort of brings a prop and uses that to sort of tell us what's happening or what she's doing. So it'll become like a bit of an aid. to help characterize or to help tell us more about what exactly is happening. And then on the 3 screens behind, we've got all the video projection, which sort of just zooms in on specifically what is happening. So it might be chapati making, when we're making food, there's a real close-up of hands and all of what's happening. You really get a sense of like the interior, which we can't do in an abstract space. We don't have a table, we don't have bowls, but we do have a world, an audiovisual world that is sort of helping explain the detail of that location. When we're in Amber's home, we actually only have 3 objects on stage. So that is Dad's armchair, their rug, their living room rug, and a little sort of gas heater fireplace, a little portable thing. And I was really interested in choosing props that were secondhand, because they have they've had a life before, or many lives before. They're often very worn or tired looking. And I just have the impression that Amber's home isn't sparkly and new and perhaps shinier or modern. It's sort of a place where they've either inherited items from past homeowners, and it just speaks to their class. In all honesty, it speaks to what they're able to afford, and how they've had to manage. And I think having that set against the curve of the shape of the set sort of then helps speak to even more strongly how Amber's actually able to mobilise herself out of this location and into this newer home, which has a different feeling by the end of the show. Actually, the levels on the set have become really important to movement in a way that I hadn't actually anticipated when designing. And movement, I'm always really excited by movement, but I think they've managed to be quite inventive in the way they're using it. It sort of becomes a starting block for some of the races. It helps depict different locations. And I think when you're designing something abstract, you do have to be quite inventive around what levels suggest. And a lot of it is just suggestion. And I think in a play like this, it gives us those levels and that materiality, the concrete around sort of does a lot of that suggesting. It sort of is able to depict a sort of time and place quite well, I'd say. I think when you design something abstract, it tends to allow lots of space for you to be able to approach things in a more suggestive manner. And so it's not rigid about time, it's not rigid about location, it's not rigid about like concrete set changes. I think you have an opportunity to be quite creative about how those all feel and look. And just because of the way this script and book, the original book, were written, to me, it feels like this direction somehow can hold the multitude of languages and feelings that the book and script offer in a way that felt more genuine. Just felt like there was real space to be inventive, which is how the books really comes across to me.